Welcome, everyone. If we could please call this meeting to order and start with a moment of silence for prayer or reflection. Thank you. I would just like to recognize that we have a Crestwood grade 6 class in the theater in the audience tonight. Some of you may know that the grade 6 curriculum requires them to study the levels of government, and I would assume that you're here tonight to observe the municipal, or as you call it, the civic level of government. So welcome.
Okay, so first up we have adoption of the agenda.
Is there any additions? All right, seeing none.
We'll adopt the agenda. Next up we have adoption of the minutes. Item 3.1 on page 3, you'll find minutes from our last meeting of January the 22nd.
Any errors, omissions? All right, seeing none, we'll accept them.
Moving right along now to reports. Our first report's item 4.1 on page 9. Administrative Committee meeting January 24th, and this is RFP for information.
So moved.
Seconder. I haven't heard a second.
Second.
Okay. Councillor Hirsch. Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is to do with item 4.1, the recommendation for the admin committee to purchase a combustion turbine replacement. So this is for our citizens that I would like to explain what's happening here, and also for those on council, is that we presently have in our inventory 3 LM6000 generating units that produce electricity. When you turn the switch on your TV at home, you have power. And one of those, of 3, is what we call a backup unit, because you can't wait for one to break down and then switch it over, because it takes hours and hours and hours of labor. So we monitor those LM6000 by the number of hours that we utilize them, and then we replace them on a timely basis. We send the old one back, it gets refurbished, and we buy a refurbished unit at less than half of the price of buying a new one. So this is a terrific business decision to ensure that our city will not be without power due to a breakdown at the power generation unit. So, Council and ladies and gentlemen, that's why we're spending this money. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Hirsch.
Well, and just to reiterate, and I'm fully supportive of it, and it is for information because this is a budgeted item, so it was in the budget to spend this money.
Any other comments? All right, if we could call the question. That was unanimous, thank you.
All right, next item of business is item 4.2 on page 14, Development and Infrastructure Committee meeting minutes of January 24th, with items number 1 and 2 for adoption.
I'll move that report for adoption.
I'll second that.
Any comments? All right, if we could vote. Councillor Hirsch. That was unanimous, thank you.
Our next report is item 4.3 on page 62, Energy and Utilities Committee meeting of January 25th. This report's for information.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
There's nothing on this item. If we could vote. That was unanimous, thank you.
Next report's item 4.4, Public Services Committee meeting on page 63. January 29th meeting, again, just for information.
I'll move that report.
Second.
Any comments? Well, if we could vote. And that was unanimous.
The next report's item 4.5, page 64, Corporate Services Committee meeting of January 30th. This is for information also.
I'll move that report as indicated.
Second.
Any comments? Questions? No? All right, if we could vote. That was unanimous, thank you.
Reports for reception. Our first report's item 5.1 on page 68, Municipal Planning Commission meeting minutes of December 13th.
Move reception.
Yes, seconder, Councillor Varga is not here.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on the MPC minutes? All right, if we could vote. That was unanimous, thank you.
Next report's item 5.2, page 73, Heritage Resources Committee meeting minutes of January the 9th.
I'll move that for information.
Second.
Any questions, comments? All right, if we could call the question. That was unanimous, thank you.
Our final report for reception is item 5.3, page 76, draft minutes of the Police Commission of January the 18th and the Police Chief's report.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, comments? Councillor Turnbull?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair to Councillor Dubanowski, who's also on the Police Commission. I noticed in reading the report that drugs have gone up, arrests and what am I trying to say here? Confiscating of drugs has gone up 38% over last year. Do we have any idea how that compares to other cities of our size, or is this, because all of a sudden we are seeing this huge increase in drug busts? Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Turnbull, I wouldn't be able to speak to that specifically. I can say in general sense that every community is seeing an upswing, if you will, in drug activity. We're all aware of the fentanyl crisis that's hitting our province and our country. That's not a general statement that gives any credence to the fact that other forms of drug trade or acquisition is happening in the drug world as well. But in fact, for a while there, we were seeing an upswing in the other forms of drugs, and believe it or not, it was encouraging news on a provincial level, because when you're dealing with fentanyl and the likes, you're talking about a significant system of drug trade that has a lot of victims, and we've seen that happening. And so there's a lot of interest, I know, with the Alberta Association of Chiefs of Police and the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police to deal with this matter, try and put resources there, and they're making a dent in that drug trade, and every time they have the opportunity to make these significant busts, we have the opportunity to take some of the drug trade off the out of the community. But ultimately, there has been an upsurge, if you will, across the province, and I'm not saying that in a defensive way. Our community is not exempt from that, and it's definitely a crisis that is happening elsewhere. But ultimately, we're monitoring it, and again, the chiefs in this province are working on strategies that are going to work to combat that, hopefully.
Yeah, just to follow up, actually, this was a compliment to our local Medicine Hat police, because if drug arrests and busts have gone up 38%, obviously they're doing their job. It worries me when we see that kind of increase, whether it's here. Medicine Hat was always this nice, sleepy town, city that you could feel comfortable in, and now we are starting to feel the effects of the drug trades that the rest of the province has. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McIntosh?
Thanks, Your Worship. I would agree with Councillor Turnbull. I was thinking about the students that I work with, and the students in the audience would be in the same age bracket, and this is the first generation of kids growing up in Medicine Hat who are going to go out into the community and find that the safety and the rampant drug use that's taking place. It is a different community, and it's my hope that over the next couple of years, we're going to be able to figure out some strategies to target that. My question, though, relates to one specific comment in the report regarding a student in grade 7 getting a ticket for bullying. Now, being a teacher for 20 years, many schools I worked in were identified as bully-free schools. I think that is an unattainable goal, and I think many of the students up there might agree that bullying is something that happens every day. To the police commission member, do you know what that individual was charged with? Because it just identified it was a ticket.
Through the chair to Councillor McIntosh, I don't know. We don't get into the specifics on every charge, but I will say that it used to be a lot more descriptive. One of the we're being very transparent. The police service working in the school system wants to be account for any incidents that occur in the school systems no different than they do in the community. But we don't give specifics around necessarily the schools and the like, because we don't, the concern was that we were going to tarnish the reputation of individual schools, because as you can appreciate as an educator, and I can, you work at this very tirelessly every day to mitigate in your school systems, but things will occur and inevitably do. And so we're accounting for them, but we don't necessarily know all the specifics about it, but I could look into it for you if you wish.
Thank you, Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to comment. I always like to look at the photo radar stats when we get our police report, and we now have the stats for all of 2017. So for the full year, we actually monitored more than 1 million vehicles, and we issued 6,000 less tickets. So maybe people are getting the message and they're slowing down for whatever reason, but I know this is lost revenue to the city, but it is encouraging to see that people seem to be slowing down.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Dumanowski.
Well, Your Worship, I was just going to add to the earlier comment around the drug trade happening in our community, and Councillor McIntosh said it well. We have a generation that is no different than the past generations, exempt from the drug world and the challenges happening in our community and exposures, but the dangers of the likes of fentanyl and everything are setting a whole new precedence when it comes to educating our community, and our citizens out there, our young citizens, are learning about it now through the likes of EPIC, which is an opportunity for them at a young age to learn about drugs and what's happening in that culture, and what strategies they can use and employ to prevent themselves from getting caught up in that world. And I know when they're young, it's unimaginable to even think that there are people in our community that are involved in that world, but by giving them that education, giving those tools to really think through these things and work in powers and numbers, and how to turn away and walk away, and all the simple strategies that we take for granted, they invest in these in their conversations, and awareness is a key strategy to mitigating this in the future. And we're not likely to eradicate the drug trade in our communities, but we have a powerful tool in educating our young people and our community at large, even those involved in that world, that there are targeted opportunities for them to be dealt with in the stats that are being compiled here today, that if they wish to and have the opportunity to change their lives, they have that. But the reality is we need to start with this generation right here, and we're hoping you young men and women are listening very closely to your teachers, your parents, and your school resource officers to really learn about all these strategies so that you can be the next generation that make all the great choices, and I'm very confident you will.
Thank you, Councillor Hirsch.
Your Worship, I just want to reiterate the fact that even though we're finding some increases to the drug and charges to that effect, we're not immune. We're a municipality just like anyone else in Alberta that suffered through an economic downturn. When I did have a chance to speak to Chief McGrogan, he did indicate people that are unemployed, that have bills to pay, become very desperate. And it's sad, a case that did happen within Alberta, but there's probably people out there that never thought to have that criminal intent. But when you're faced with, payments and obligations, sometimes they turn that way. So, I think it's, again, there was the question raised, is this just limited to Medicine Hat, or are we immune? No, we're not immune, but I have every confidence in the police service that we have, that they're on top of things, and they're doing proactive things that was just indicated, and of course, there's the reactive stuff in terms of charges. So, again, I just want to reiterate, we're just not alone, but we're just part of an ongoing problem.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments on the Police Commission report? All right, if we could vote. That was unanimous. Thank you.
Moving on now to bylaws for second and third reading. Item 6.1, page 120. We have bylaw 4438, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to establish the application procedure and fees for permits issued or any other material or service provided pursuant to the Safety Codes Act, the regulations, and this bylaw.
Your Worship, and ask that bylaw 4438 be read a second time.
I'll second that.
Any questions or comments on second reading? All right, if we could vote. And that was unanimous. Thank you.
So, Your Worship, at this time, I'd ask that bylaw 4438 be read a third time and passed.
Second that.
Comments? Questions? All right, if we could vote. And that was unanimous. Thank you. We don't have any notice of motion or new business. I'm sorry that maybe this was a quick meeting for you tonight, but that's sometimes how it goes. So we're adjourned.